where you get to meet one of our scientists. We've got around 350 scientists working behind the scenes here at the museum. And they work with collections that are now 70 million specimens strong. An enormous collection, and we're a really huge scientific institution, which you might not know while you're walking around the galleries and enjoying the exhibitions and all the things in cases. You might not have an idea that we do that. So Nature Live gives you a chance to ask questions that you'd like to know. And today it's all about crocodiles from our collection. So at any point, if you'd like to ask a question, just raise your hand and I'll come to you with the microphone. If you're nearer towards the back, I'll probably repeat your question so that we can all hear you. And today, I'm delighted to say we've got Debbie who's interpreting in British Sign Language. So if you do use Debbie, that's marvellous. She's here for you today. So anytime at all, raise your hand for a question. Today we have Lorna Steele from our Department of Earth Sciences. Let's give her a round of applause. It's a hot day. It's a hot day. It's a long day. It's a convoluted journey.
It's hot on the trains today as well.
To get here. So let's find out a little bit more about you first, Lorna, before we talk about crocodiles. What's your job here at the museum?
I've been here 7 years, and my job currently is to look after the fossil reptile collection, or at least two certain parts of it, and that includes the fossil crocodiles. But you probably noticed that we don't seem to have any fossil crocodiles here. Well, that's true. We've borrowed some from Life Sciences Department, but we have one great big fossil for you to see later.
And how big are our fossil crocodile collections behind the scenes? How many have we got roughly?
How big is the fossil crocodile collection? Don't know, haven't counted everything. I'm going to guess about 5,000 specimens.
Wow, that's quite a lot. So, what exactly is a crocodile? Has anyone ever seen a crocodile in the wild before?
Anyone in our audience?
Well, there's quite a few last time. We've got a couple. We've got 3, 7. So that's quite a lot. Have you seen one in the wild?
No, not in the wild, no. No, I've not had a chance to see one in the wild yet, but I've got some really good photos of some in captivity and in crocodile farms and zoos, but not in the wild.
So when we do talk about crocodiles, what are we talking about? How do we know a crocodile from another animal in the same group?
Okay, well, crocodiles are reptiles. We all know that, I'm sure. Which we think of as with a scaly skin and with cold blood, so they need to use heat from the environment to warm themselves. But they belong to a bigger group called archosaurs. And now the group archosaurs you might not have heard of, but that big group includes a lot of fossil reptiles, including the dinosaurs. So they're sort of part of the same big group of reptiles as the dinosaurs. And most people are aware that there were crocodiles around in the time of the dinosaurs. Well, that's kind of true, but they weren't the kind of crocodiles and alligators that we have today. We'll explain maybe a little bit more about that if we have time.
Well, classification is really complicated, isn't it, Lorna? But we can see here
it's always complicated.
A basic sort of family tree, what you're talking about there. Tell us a little bit about that, what we can see here.
Well, when people talk about the crown group of any particular group of animals, don't need to remember this, we're generally talking about the least primitive, and that usually means the ones that are around today. So, but if you look further back down the family tree of the crocodiles, you'll see some very strange looking things, many of which were long-legged, lived on the land, were able to run around, probably didn't go in water like today's crocodiles, and some other really strange ones which lived only in the sea, and we only know of them from fossils from the Jurassic period, again a time when there were dinosaurs alive. So they've got a very complicated history, and that's probably all that you need to know, is that it's very complicated.
Now, what does the word crocodile actually mean?
The name crocodile actually means pebble worm, and I think it's a reference to the bony plates in the skin, looking a little bit like pebbles, and worm indicating a very long body, particularly a very long tail. So we've got some pictures of living crocodiles that show, yeah, that's a good one, that show this type of body, a long, thin body, streamlined for swimming, and then The body's covered in scales, and underneath the scales there are thin pieces of bone. Pebbleworm, good name.
Pebbleworm, yeah, strange name though.
A little bit strange, but...
Hell of the size of a worm. It's a line bit to a worm.
Wouldn't want to dig up one of those.
Absolutely not. So we've got a fair idea then of crocodiles and where there's a big family, and certainly their ancestors, an ancient family, what they look like. But how do we differentiate between a crocodile and an alligator and other animals similar? We've got a slide here.
Yeah. Usually this question comes from the audience, so Joe's just trying to speed things along a little bit by asking the question, what's the difference between a crocodile and an alligator? Well, the crocodile is the one on the right in this picture. They have a pointed snout, and also there's a sort of a cutout or a notch in the skull which lets one of the teeth from the lower jaw show through. And hopefully, if you can't see that too clearly in this picture, we're going to go and look at one of our specimens in just a moment. And the alligator, on the other hand, which by the way have a longer fossil record than the true crocodiles, the alligator has a rounded front to the snout, and it's generally not so long and pointed. But there is some variation, and the very early fossil alligators look more like today's crocodiles. Anyway, we won't get too bogged down in all of this. On the left, we have an animal whose group is down to only one living species today, the Indian gavial or gharial. And that's got a very long, slender snout, and you can't really mistake that for anything else.
So there's only one species of this animal you can see there on the left? Today
there's only one living species of gavial, and the false gavials, which we've got another picture of, are only down to one living species as well today. And when you look at them, their skull looks like halfway between a gavial and a crocodile. And people are still arguing about which one of those two groups they're related to. It's a bit of a mystery. You wouldn't think that with a living species there would still be mysteries, but there are plenty.
That's why we always need more scientists. So
yeah.
If you've got anyone in the audience who's a budding scientist, do carry on with your studies. We need you here at the museum. So let's have just a quick look. We always like to throw a map in there, just to show us the distribution, really, where we find crocs today.
Yes. This shows us all of the crocs today. The crocs, alligators, caimans and gavials and false gavials. They're all there, but you've probably noticed that it's only the tropical parts of the world today. Are the only places where you'll find them, in the wild, that is. There are crocodile farms within Europe, within England even, but in the wild they're only in the tropics. So you see the range around the world of where you find crocodile species today.
Now while we're talking about those differences, Lorna, it'd be really nice if you could show us on the skulls here, those differences, if you can see them. So let's go across to these brilliant specimens you brought from zoology.
Yeah, well, two of them are actually ours, which we use for comparison with fossil specimens, because sometimes we've got specimens that we can't identify, so we might need to look at a living species. So I'm sure we can get one of these up on the camera. Should we start with the crocodile? Can anyone have a guess as to which species of crocodile we've got here?
Any croc experts?
Or anyone that just wants to make a wild guess?
Yeah, wild guesses are always welcome.
It's from the opposite, almost the opposite side of the world from here. That might give us a clue. Yeah?
Okay, young lady there.
Is it an alligator?
Is it an alligator?
That one's the alligator. You're right about that one. That one's the alligator. And it's the American alligator, so they're found in the southern parts of the eastern side of North America. So, going back to this big chap here, from the other side of the world.
And it is
a very famous crocodile, got a reputation as a real bad man-eater.
Young lady at the back?
Australia, yes.
Are we talking about that region?
It is from Australia. It's from the north coast of Australia. The Australian saltwater crocodile, or estuarine crocodile. And this one's a male, and we know that because of its size. The females don't get as big as this. But this should help to show you the differences. Rounded snout in the alligator, pointed snout in the crocodile. So just in case you're wondering, next time something is attacking you, you'll be able to tell the difference next time. You're unlikely to be attacked by our other suspect, which we'll get a better view of later, because it's the Indian gavial and they've got a completely different type of snout.
Now, Lorna, you know you mentioned about where the tooth pokes out, where you can see that. Could you point to where that would be on that skull, where we can see that?
Can we get a view of this skull from the side?
Let's go back there again and just see exactly where we'd expect to see that showing. Because we
On
don't
the
have many
crocodile.
teeth in this one. Why is that, Lorna?
Oh, they've all fallen out. Crocodile tooth sockets are very simple. They're just like a straightforward cylinder, just a hole in the jaw, and the teeth don't have the complicated roots that our teeth have, so they drop out really easily. There's a notch here where I think it's the fourth big tooth on the lower jaw. Sticks up and it just goes into this notch. So it's where my finger is really there. So that means that even when the crocodile has its mouth closed, you can still see a few of the lower jaw teeth. That's why they look very smiley in all the David Attenborough programmes. They look like they're grinning. It's not, it's just they can't put their teeth away. And they don't have lips either. In the alligator you don't see so many teeth because they're tucked away and they're hidden.
Unless they're coming towards you.
Unless they're coming towards you, yeah.
Now, there's quite a lot of holes on that skull. Should we
Yes.
expect to always see those, and what do they mean?
Well, we've all got holes in our skull. It's just that when we're alive, we've got lots of flesh and stuff all over the outside. With crocodiles, the eye sockets are really close to the top of the head. They're right up on the surface of the head, right up the top. And the nostril is down here at the front. We've got two nostrils, of course, that you can see on the outside. If you take all the flesh away, really it's just a single passage. It's the same with the alligator. The other holes, further back behind the eyes, which are smaller, are where the jaw muscles attach, the muscles that close this mighty lower jaw. We've got those too, but they're on the side of our heads, and we're mostly unaware of them, but they are there.
Now, if we've got a skull like that in flexion, can we then tell how long that croc was?
Actually, there is a calculation that you can do to work out the body length of a crocodile from only a skull. So you measure it from the tip of the snout to the back of where the brain is. You take that measure and you multiply it roughly, depends on the species, but very roughly by 7. That gives you the body length to the end of the tail. It's very roughly, but it's close enough.
Good calculation to remember.
Yeah.
Anyone got a question for Lorna? It's a very hot day, everyone's feeling it. Go ahead. Oh, okay, so you may have seen some animals, yeah, a shark's a good example, a fish there that has lots of extra teeth. Do crocodiles ever have extra ones? They fall out quite often and replace them quickly?
They do. Crocodiles replace their teeth really, really quickly. Not in exactly the same way as sharks though, because the new tooth in a crocodile comes from underneath the old tooth, within the same socket, and it pushes through. The thing is with crocodiles, as they're enjoying life, biting into things, they break their teeth, and a broken tooth is not a lot of use for something that eats meat. So they have very quick tooth replacement, and they come through and they just take the place of the old tooth. And this goes on throughout the animal's life. There is no limit to the number of teeth.
Now let's talk a bit about their life, their lifestyles and their sort of life expectancies and whatnot. I've got a nice clip here from the BBC Attenborough programme of 2 crocs under the water, saltwater crocodiles, courting, shall we say. There's a lovely bubble making scene here. Now, they obviously go about mating, they lay eggs. You've got an egg here to show us.
I did bring along a crocodile egg, yes. But here's the male and the female saltwater crocodile, the same species that we have with the crocodile skull on the table. And you'll probably be able to tell when they do a bit more of a close-up. The male is much bigger than the female. That's the female on the right, the smaller one. And he weighs about twice as much as her. Yet their behaviour underwater while they're courting is very gentle. I must say it isn't always very gentle in crocodile courting, because the female isn't always very willing. But here they're behaving very, very gently.
So that's, yeah, that size difference is quite distinct there. Now, how many legs might they egg?
How many eggs?
Yeah.
Oh, 30 or 40 is sort of the norm for most croc species, 30 or 40 eggs all in one go. The female makes a nest on land, but near a river or near water. The nest is made using sand, vegetation, that kind of thing. Just looks like a great big mound. And she lays her eggs and she buries them. And I think they take something like 1 month to 2 months, something like that, to hatch. In crocodile farms, this egg is from a croc farm. Can I zoom in? There, I think that's working. Yeah. In the crocodile farms, they remove the eggs from the nest and put them in an incubator so that they have a better chance of survival. Now, this egg was an infertile egg, it didn't hatch. So it's another source of income for the crocodile farm. They put the egg in a box and sell it. Only a few pounds.
And we can see one here that's done quite the opposite, it's hatched.
Yeah, this one's hatched.
And so what's aftercare like with parent crocodiles? How are they with their young?
Well, surprisingly, they're very, very attentive of their young. The mother will guard the nest fiercely, attacking any other animal that comes near, including humans. When the babies are ready, they make a little cheeping noise to say they're ready to hatch, and she'll dig them out of the nest and help them to hatch by cracking the shell with her teeth. And even when they're hatched, they're not completely on their own. She keeps them together for some time and protects them. And we've got an alligator mother here giving a ride to one of her babies, and you can just see some of the other babies in the background. They're very vulnerable when they're small. Remember, they're coming out of an egg this size. They're only under a foot long when they're born, certainly well under 10 inches long when they're born.
Any other questions?
How long?
How long do they live? How old do they get to, roughly?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's a great question.
Yeah, that's a difficult one because they live a long time. So for us to be sure how long crocodiles live, we've got to hatch an egg and then keep that animal alive until it dies naturally of old age. And these crocodiles live the length of a human life or even longer. So they haven't got the same zookeeper looking after them all their life. So this makes it difficult to be sure. However, 60 or 70 years is quite a good age for a crocodile. Some apparently have survived in captivity for about 100 years. But again, it's hard to be sure that that is genuine and that it's not a problem with the record keeping by the zoo or, yes, the usual problems.
So we talked quite a bit about modern crocodiles. It'd be really good to have a look at some of the things that you work with in your Earth Sciences department, some of these fossil crocs from way, way back.
Yes, sure. Well,
and firstly, I think maybe look at the scale, because the massive difference between modern and ancient is size. And look at some of these.
There were some real whoppers around. I mean, 3 of the species up there on the chart, the 3 small ones, are 3 of today's living species. The 2 big ones in red and orange on the left-hand side are 2 fossil species, both from the Cretaceous period, both from the time when dinosaurs lived. They're absolutely massive. It must be something like twice the length of any living large crocodile today. But I'm not saying that all fossil crocodiles were big. Certainly not, no. Some were very, very small. Even an adult got some very small species. But there were some real big ones. On the trolley we do have one of the big ones.
Now, show us this. Let's have a look under that cover then.
Right.
What have you got?
It's from India. It's from northern India. And it dates from just after the time the dinosaurs had ended. And it was found by a civil engineer who was working with the British Army in northern India in the 1830s, and he met a paleontologist in the town where he was living, and this guy said, "You must come with us, we're going out looking for fossils." So, besides, among other specimens, they found this snout tip of a giant crocodile of some sort. Just the snout tip. This is on the screen now. Now they were in India, remember, so every day probably in the rivers they saw, it's on the right side of the, going on this side, every day they would have seen this native crocodilian of India called the gavial, which has got a long, slender snout. So they thought they'd got just the snout tip of a fossil gavial. They were nearly right. It was something slightly different. But they thought it was this one, a total body length, 18 metres. 18 metres, so God, just imagine that. Whew. Turned out they were wrong. Modern day science now places this at total body length about 11 to 12 metres. Even so, that's still twice the size of any living saltwater croc or alligator or Nile croc or anything.
So what kind of animal was it? Which group was it in?
Well, they were wrong about it being a gavial. It was actually a... Have we got them back on the screen?
Okay.
It was actually one of the false gavials, a fossil form of this one which is still alive today. And today down to only one species. And thank goodness it doesn't get to 11 to 12 metres long.
Now just going back, we did see this enormous one in red. Sarcosuchus there. I just love showing this picture because this is, it's known as super croc.
Yeah.
That's obviously an artist's impression. We don't know whether they did.
Whether they
like
did try?
this, but the size is
I don't know.
phenomenal.
Yes, super croc, or Sarcosuchus to give it its proper name, was made famous by an American paleontologist who excavated fairly recently a skull and some other parts in West Africa, I think it was. Yeah.
We've got a skull here as well. We can't really tell the scale, but at 11
It's
or
massive,
12 metres
yeah.
long, that's absolutely
11 to 12 metres total body length, not just the skull.
yeah.
That would be
No.
terrifying
Did
and
we-
probably impossible.
Did we have a question around there somewhere? Yes, young man there.
How fast can a crocodile swim?
That's a good question because we saw them moving fairly slowly under the water there when they were reporting. But do we know roughly how much speed they?
I don't know exactly, but they can get some good speed going because they swim by wiggling the tail. In fact, the whole body does a sort of an S shape in the water.
And of course, when they're not swimming like this is a gavial. When do they do this? They do a lot of kind of sneaky.
They do a lot of hiding, crocodiles do. I mean, a lot of the time, I suspect they will be there in the water and we won't know that they are there because they do a lot of this sort of thing, lurking at the surface of the water with the body under the water and only the eyes showing. And if they want to stay there a long time, they need to keep the tip of the snout above water as well so they can breathe. Yeah, this is a female gavial. I'm really annoyed I didn't have the camera on a higher setting because it didn't do this again in the whole time that I was standing there watching. Yeah, not in the wild, no, in the Bronx Zoo at New York, I think.
So just to finish, Lorna, how do our museum collections help us then find out more about crocodiles?
Well, we're always using them to look at the history of life on this planet, and we do actually get a lot of visitors. In fact, only this week and last week I had a visitor from Italy who was studying fossil alligators from here in the UK, from a site in Hampshire near Southampton. So it's and this collection came here in 1850. So something from collected that long ago and has been here all this time is still important and still being used even this week.
That's why we keep all those 70 million here behind the scenes Thanks so much, Lorna. If you enjoyed today, we've come to the end of the event, unfortunately, but you can look online and see the rest of our events. The summer holidays are approaching. We do have 2 events every day throughout the entire holidays. Thank you for your questions. If you did use Debbie's help today, we have a feedback form we would love you to fill in if possible. So if you did, just raise your hand, I'll get you a form. But most of all, can you join me in thanking Lorna and thanking Debbie for coming in today and telling us all about crocodiles. You can stay behind and have a look at the specimens too if you'd like.